If you work fully remote, your odds of promotion may quietly drop by a third. Not because you're worse, but because you're harder to see. That's the part no one says directly. In one large data set tracking millions of white-collar workers, about 5.6% of in-office or hybrid employees were promoted in a year. For fully remote workers, it was about 3.9%. That gap doesn't look dramatic at first glance. But promotions are rare events. Small differences compound. Over years, that gap becomes trajectory. Remote work didn't remove status. It removed exposure. And exposure is often what promotions run on. In office, visibility is automatic. People see you in motion. They hear your tone when something goes wrong. They notice how others respond to you. You don't have to narrate yourself. Your presence does some of that for you. Remote work changes that completely. Now visibility is engineered. It has to be packaged, delivered. That shift sounds neutral. It isn't. Because promotions are rarely decided by spreadsheets alone. They're decided in rooms, under time pressure, with partial memory. A manager is asked, "Who's ready?" They don't pull up a full behavioral analysis. They reach for who feels reliable. And reliability often feels like familiarity. Familiarity often comes from exposure. That's where the advantage starts. Here's something uncomfortable. In offices, leaders gather micro-evidence all day. Who stays calm? Who sounds confident? Who others defer to? These impressions aren't formal, but they're sticky. Remote work strips away most of that ambient evidence. Now everything must travel through a narrow pipe. Text, calls, documents. If your value travels well through that pipe, you rise. If your value depends on nuance, mood reading, or informal influence, it becomes harder to detect. Not impossible. Harder. That difference is quiet, but it's structural. Another study found managers were less likely to select remote employees for raises or promotions when those employees were less physically present than peers. It wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed as uncertainty. Uncertainty makes people conservative. Conservative decisions favor what's visible. This is where the illusion begins. On a screen, everyone looks equal. Same-sized rectangle. Same mute button. It feels flatter. But hierarchy didn't disappear. It became opaque. And opacity creates anxiety. Here's a scene. A weekly video meeting. 10 people. Cameras on. One person speaks in sharp, clean sentences. They summarize their work confidently. Even when the work isn't perfect, it sounds complete. Another person handled something complex. But explaining complexity in 2 minutes is hard. They circle the point. They apologize for rambling. After the call, the manager remembers the clean update. Not because it was better, because it was easier. That memory becomes exposure. Exposure becomes opportunity. Now imagine something else. It's an in-office day. A leader walks out of a meeting and runs into 2 team members near the kitchen. They chat for 3 minutes. Nothing strategic happens. No grand insight. But during that exchange, the leader sees posture, energy, composure. Later that week, a stretch assignment appears. The leader thinks of the people who felt steady. That's exposure compounding in real time. Remote work removes accidental exposure. Now exposure must be intentional. And intentional exposure feels like self-promotion. So some people overcorrect. More messages, more visibility, more speaking time. Not because they're ego-driven, because invisibility feels dangerous. Others go quiet. They believe output should speak. They assume good work is obvious. Months later, someone else gets promoted. There's no confrontation, just a quiet internal sentence. I thought I was doing everything right. That's the emotional center of this shift. Remote work didn't make people less capable. It changed how capability is perceived. In offices, effort has witnesses. You see who's staying late. You hear the fatigue. You feel collective intensity. Remote work makes effort private. Private effort is easy to overlook. And here's where it compounds. Promotions aren't just raises. They're narrative accelerators. One promotion leads to bigger projects. Bigger projects create stronger stories. Stronger stories lead to more promotions. If visibility delays the first one, it delays the whole chain. That's why a difference between 5.6% and 3.9% matters. Not emotionally, mathematically. Now here's the uncomfortable twist. Remote work also removed some of the intimidation of offices. No watching who walks into which room. No silent power plays across conference tables. No constant physical hierarchy. For some people, that felt freeing. And it was. But freedom from visible hierarchy doesn't mean freedom from hierarchy. It just means hierarchy got harder to see. Humans don't stop ranking each other because they're on Zoom. They just use different cues. Who responds fast? Who speaks smoothly? Who gets direct messages from leadership? Who gets invited to quick follow-ups? Remote tools make comparison easier. You can literally see names repeat. That creates vigilance. Vigilance creates subtle tension. Communication becomes more polished, less messy, more careful. Because public channels feel like stages. And stages amplify status. Eventually, teams hit a realization. The loudest voice on a video call isn't always the strongest contributor. Clarity is powerful. But clarity is not depth. Some leaders adjust. They build deliberate systems to surface invisible work. When that happens, something relaxes. The rules become readable again. But not every team adjusts. And even when they do, proximity still carries weight. Being physically present generates ambient trust. Not because remote workers lack trust. Because humans evolved to read physical cues. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, body posture. Video compresses those signals. Text removes them. So your original observation holds. Being in the office creates exposure. Remote work reduces it. And exposure often influences promotion decisions. Not in a dramatic villainous way. In a quiet, cumulative way. Remote work didn't flatten status into equality. It flattened status into opacity. And when something powerful becomes opaque, people don't relax. They compete harder, signal more, or withdraw. The ladder didn't disappear. It just became harder to see. And when a ladder is harder to see, the climb feels lonelier. That's the shift no one planned for. Not productivity, not freedom, visibility. And visibility still decides more than people like to admit.